Alex and I met at the doors. So I'll be clear that doors means, well, when I ran in the election last year, I guess, I door knocked. I had the opportunity to door knock on Alex's door. And I had been messaging consistently before and leading up to it that we were in the Apollo 13 moment. That, we really need this province just really needs to put all of our resources on the table and have a discussion about how we're going to do all the things we want to do. And so that was sort of my messaging, like I said, for months. And, people would hear it and say something interesting to it. But it wasn't until I started talking to Alex that he said, yeah, but you know why Apollo 13 was successful, right? It was because of Apollo 11. I said, go on. And so Alex said that, it's just sort of like if you follow Michael Phelps, they anticipated negative outcomes and and made plans to adjust based on those potential outcomes. So, for example, if we ran out of oxygen, what would we do? If we were feeling a pressure change, how would we adjust? If we were off trajectory, how would we fix direction? And because they took the time to do that, because they took the time to learn what if scenarios, they were ready when they were faced with the Apollo 13 moment. So so that's really like the opportunity I saw. When I first met Alex, it was just, wow, this is someone that just added a whole new dimension to my thinking. And it's just sort of been like that ever since. I would say that it's just the way Alex is. He operates with a really good heart, right? He has a good intention, and so when he challenges me on something, we're able to work through it because we both are operating from that place of best intention. So that's why we're working together. And then what the purpose of this conversation is to we want to rebuild community. We have what I feel is a big gap in society where we're expected to take positions or be in camps and work potentially on opposite sides of the table. All of these things that we sort of say, but they're and it's expected that we're in opposition against each other, and that's not where we need to be. We need to think in terms of we're all in this together type thinking. So yeah, please go ahead, Alex, add to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, essentially, there's a common saying when people just kind of want to deflect. It's like there's two sides to every coin, black and white, 0 and 1, these binary systems of thinking. But what they're forgetting is there are actually three sides to a coin, right? There's the edge, right? And that edge is crucial. The edge is what holds the coin together, right? Amidst these
We're all in this
dichotomies.
together.
Yeah. So, like what we're seeking out to do is learn from other people who have varying views, right? And who normally would be dichotomized in terms of opposing sides, and just kind of maybe make an attempt to bridge some gaps and creatively find a way to compete with each other rather than in competition solely, so that maybe we can make a difference over the long term, step by step. It's a shot in the dark, but it's worth a shot.
Yeah. Yeah, I really actually I like the idea of winning with each other, right? So this concept that we're stronger together.
The difference between perspective and perception. Some of you have probably heard the parable about the elephant and the blind man. It depends a bit on where you're standing and what you're looking at. That would be, I guess, your perspective. So I can be standing on one side and I see it a certain way, and I'm looking at the same thing as you are, but you're on a different side of it. So perspective is going to be different where you're standing and looking at it. Perception could be colored by my experience. Maybe I've never seen an elephant before. I've never seen a sculpture like this before. So my description and what I perceive it to be might be different. It's really about curiosity and being open to say, well, this is what I see, and I know that that's what I'm seeing, and explaining even where I'm coming from. My background is this. I think it's important when we know in some of the other rooms that I do around with the PQ coaches, helping, where are you calling in from and where are you on the PQ journey helps us understand a little bit of the perspective that they might be bringing from that. So the more that you know about, well, I live in Calgary, I have an engineering background, I'm a coach. This is how I, know Jenny, or how I know people. Like, all of that helps other people understand where I might be coming from. So I think having that openness to share, without judgment of myself or the other people, what that might look like. And then, to your point, describing what I'm seeing, feeling, perceiving from this experience, and then be open to understanding that someone else is seeing it different, and how can I start piecing those together. So the elephant in the blind man is, someone over here is talking about, well, it looks and feels like this, and someone over here is, it looks and feels like that, and none of them are fully correct. We don't have the full picture, so being able to start piecing that all together. And I think, especially as moderators, being able to be listening to that and kind of creating that picture for others, in terms of, okay, I'm hearing this from all of these different perspectives, and I'm creating a picture for myself. Let me test it out, right? Let me see if this is resonating, and being open to that.
From a moderation perspective, maybe consider setting up community agreements. There's a positive intelligence community of practice that I'm in. And one day, something subtle happened that made a couple of first time guests, including myself, a little creeped out. I'm the type of person, I'm going to go back and see if it clears. And then somebody went to social media without, maybe they were overly stimulated, so to speak. And in response, a bunch of discussions happen, and there is now a community agreement. The community agreement is shared at the top of every meeting. So it could be a link that you pin at the top of the room. It's there for people to view, and it's shared for general knowledge. It really talks about how the complex conversations may happen there with respect for privacy. And it kind of frames what the standard of conduct is. I haven't seen this anyplace else before in this quite the same way. And it was something that they created in response to somebody's creepy comments on social media. So it might be a suggestion if you're expecting
Love it.
difficult conversations.
As a nurse, I think that what I've seen, definitely exacerbated by the pandemic, and to the scenario that you spoke about earlier around people working a lot of long hours, often we're seeing a lot more compassion fatigue, caregiver burnout, and moral injury. And what I'm seeing is a little surprising to me, that people seem to be more apathetic, which I think is giving maybe the impression that they're emotionally regulated, when in fact people are so tired and burnt out that they just kind of feel like, I just don't have it in me. And I'm wondering, potentially, if you have any thoughts about like what the long term consequence of that would be, in terms of not really displaying any external, capacity of showing that someone is in distress. So an employer may not know what to look for to support an individual. Employees might not know how to support their colleagues. Uh, I'm just curious if you have any thoughts about that.
Oh, Michelle, I have a lot of thoughts about. Thank you so much for that question. I was waiting for you to give me a good one there. Um, so this is an area near and dear to my heart. And so I said fight, flight. There are also other options here that an organism does when it's experiencing threat. So what Michelle's describing there is what we consider toxic stress, because this fight or flight system originally was designed, and I'm talking like I'm the creator of this, but I'm not, but it was originally designed as an acute response. So I see a bear, the system kicks in, I resolve, I either get away or I fight the bear, whatever happens, and then my system returns to baseline. And that all happens within a matter of minutes or at most a few hours. What we're seeing with a pandemic, which is a physical threat, right? It's a physical threat and it brings a lot of social emotional threat too. So we have loss, we have unpredictability everywhere. There wasn't a script for this, especially in healthcare or education. I mean, there were scripts, but they weren't near what we needed to have for this. So what we have are people who are experiencing this level of my fight or flight system has been activated since March of 2020. So you can fight for a while, you can flight for a while, and the last sort of another option when an organism is tired of fighting, not able to fight, or can't get away, is this sort of shutting down mechanism. So organisms will shut down, try to conserve energy. And I think you brought up just such an interesting dichotomy with healthcare professionals. It's the same way for therapists. I spend most of my time supervising therapists these days. And it's like, how can I, as a therapist or as a healthcare provider, stay compassionate enough to where I can stay in touch with all this suffering around me and not have so much get on me that I'm constantly in fight or flight mode?
I think I've recently come to a, a realization that's so simple it seems ridiculous, but I think there's something to it. And I think it's reflected in the media and how reliable it is or used to be, or some kinds of it can still be, but new media isn't. And it all relates back to what I think is actually the absolute essence and prerequisite, the foundation of society, civil society, decent society, is good faith. And it's a pretty foreign concept these days, but there's good faith and bad faith. And the law assumes that citizens operate in good faith and honest in their dealings. They're not trying to screw everybody all the time. Nothing would work if everybody was always doing that. And, and that's sort of accountability was reflected in the media through libel law. There's editors, there's serious institutions, and there was serious checks on the accuracy of information in newspapers. There's always bias, sometimes horrifically, but those standards are useful over time. It's a filter for the good. And something big happened in 1996. The law was changed where two times. One of the Fox News cases was about lying in the media, and they challenged it in court and won that yes, it's okay to lie now. You used to have to give fair response, equal time to somebody to reply if you said something about them, and Ronald Reagan removed that, so you didn't have the right to reply in the media anymore. But after 1996, there was no libel controls for new media would eventually become social media, everything online, websites. Now there's no libel. Now there's no consequences to lying about people. Now you're allowed to lie and you're allowed to lie about people. And that's why there's no good faith in the media,
Yeah.
in the
That's
new
the
media.
that's the
That's the
section two.
missing
That's the
piece.
section 230 provision, right? Where as long as you're not officially a publisher,
Yeah.
then you're protected under those
And
libel
that's
procedures.
that's the kernel that allows Musk to turn Twitter into a shithole with $60 billion worth of borrowed money, that it's a cesspool now. And much of the media is like that. That's because there's no more space, institutions, enforcement of good faith.
Humans are pretty nearsighted. It's hard for us to think well in advance. Politics is even structured in a way that creates even more short-term thinking, and we should severely, like, really question politicians that say that they're, have the answers to all of our issues, because these are complex issues that nobody knows the answer to, and the only way we are going to figure it out is if we take the blinders off and have hard conversations about how our lifestyles are essentially contributing to the problem, as well as contributing to us not being able to address it. We need more than a wartime movement to reframe our societies and our modern lives in a way that prepares for the dire consequences that are essentially knocking at our back door right now. And Mother Nature's ready to come in with a pitchfork and, huck us out on the back of the compost pile so she can start over again. It all comes down to the story of modernity, and essentially we all believe in an unlimited growth, potential. That's why we have to sell our oil and gas to China and to the States. If we looked at our oil and gas endowment as a legacy to honor and cherish on a territorial perspective, we could be the most utopian place on earth. It's so important that we try very hard, despite how uncomfortable it might be, to make unexpected alliances. These are issues that cross all political boundaries, and those in power many times try to divide and conquer only to gain more power, but we need to realize that the power lies with the people. You know, you look at a natural ecosystem, it's not just one kind of thing, it's many diverse peoples, and that's what makes it work.
Step one is availability. You need to be available if people are counting on you in a crisis. Step two is recognizing that people are undergoing a trauma when they're facing down an emergency like this and a crisis. In the context of communicating to the public and communities, that means making sure that you're following trauma-informed practice. In this case, it means making sure that you understand that people can only take in so much information at once. It's about distilling in all that incident information that may be complex and distilling it down to the things that are most important to people while still ensuring that you're getting the message across and building trust in folks that you're doing everything you can as an organization to keep those folks safe. And the next step is be responsive. People are going to be looking for information all the time. They're going to be reaching out to you, and they're going to be having a hard time processing information. So making sure that you're making every effort to play your part and be responsive to people. And beyond just sticking to the facts, you need to recognize that empathy is a critical piece to every bit of that for your communication and response in a crisis to be effective. The last piece that I had put there in terms of what a good emergency response in crisis communications looks like is following it through to the end. Even after the immediate risk or crisis begins to subside, oftentimes you have people moving into recovery, and you're going to want to you're going to need to continue to be with them all the way through, making sure that you're continuing to follow through even after the biggest crises subside. A lot of times people can take their eye off the ball during recovery, I think, and you want to avoid that every step of the way. And of course, foundational to every bit of this, you need to be honest and you need to build credibility. And that means being honest about the good, the bad, and the ugly sometimes. That's something that I think in government communications world that you have to push back against sometimes when you're doing crisis communications. You're not doing public relations, you're doing public information, and people are going to trust you more people are going to trust you if you're honest about the fact that you might have screwed up or something might have gone wrong or something could have went better than if you're covering it up, so to speak, or trying to talk around it. There was certainly a couple instances this summer where we did make mistakes and we had to be honest about it.
The command system that we all use in North America now is based on the U.S. Forest Service, and it's been integrated into a disaster management system now for many different types of incidents. And so it has a very, it's well known over North America. So I could take someone from a fire crew in Idaho and bring them up here, and they would know who they're reporting to and what their tasks were, kind of thing. So that's super important that we have people that understand the system, who they report to, as well as span of control. So you're looking after a certain amount of people or a certain amount of crews. That's usually 3 to 7 is the optimum. And once you get past that 7, that causes a lot of chaos because you can't keep track of everyone. So that's the number one thing, is having a proper system in place that people understand, and they understand who their supervisor is, what their roles and responsibilities are, and ensuring that supervisors aren't overwhelmed with all these resources that are placed on them, because once they're overwhelmed, not good decisions aren't being made then. Number 2 is having some form of pre-suppression, I call it, and just because that's my background is being in fire, but I'll say pre-planning of resources. So in many cases, and I keep bringing up, let's say floods or wildfires, we know when it's hot and dry, when lightning's coming. And so we can have resources in place prior to when some of these fires start. So the crux is if we don't get lightning and we get rain, then you possibly could have wasted money on pre-suppressing an area, like having all these resources in place prior to the accident. But the fact is, it's insurance. And I think people have to understand that having these resources before the fires get there and get them when they're small is the number one most important thing to do. The expertise of people that are junior to you, they have different experiences, they have a different background, and just because they've been on a couple of years doesn't, they could be way more valuable on a certain call than you are with 20 or 30 years on. And I would, ask those incident commanders out there is we've hired people that have gone through so much to get on, let's say, a structural fire department in a big city. Yet once they get on, they're basically back to zero. Like I've told Jen in the past, it's taken me, I'm 19 years on the department I'm on now, and it's taken me basically 17 years to get back to where I was after my last year of wildland in terms of my expertise and intuition and judgment and all that stuff while I was a wildland firefighter, because I started on the bottom of another organization. I would ask the next generation of people in the professional departments who have full-time jobs to really take a look at those junior people.
We need to be understanding that what we're changing are the conditions of the earth that we can live with.
Right, of course.
Which is not trying to say we're so special, but we are the only species that can have this conversation.
Yeah, right.
And therefore we have obligations
Yes.
that right whales and squirrels and grizzly bears don't have.
That's right.
And that's not to put them down. Our modern culture doesn't do deep learning. In this part of the world where there used to be winter, if you're skating on a slough outside town, you would learn that if you move fast enough, when the ice was not quite thick enough to hold you, you didn't get wet. That's one of my images of our modern culture. We're trying to move faster and faster and faster. And the faster we move, the thinner our understanding gets. It's a conversation for everybody, but that means that the tone of voice will be different and some of the content will be different, even though it's part of the same conversation.
And we were saying about groundswell, critical mass is, I actually think that your comment about leadership, there isn't the leaders that are out there that understand it. So it's going to be some kind of collective group, everybody coming on board, realizing it. I mean, in the next few months, we're going to be facing a massive drought, which, if there's any silver lining to it, is it's going to bring this forward. Is there are limits. There are limits, and we have to deal with it. It's very much in front of us. You can't deny that there's no water.
That's right. Yeah. Can't fake water. I see the crisis as a social, environmental, and economic crisis.
This is a crisis of relationship that shows itself at all these different levels. It is a crisis rooted in arrogance, in a lack of humility, and in supremacy thinking. And it's deeply tied to colonization, to colonialism, extraction, and that human nature binary that sets the human apart from nature and seeks to pretend that we are above. And we are not in good relationship. And that really translates down to we are not in good relationship with ourselves internally. We have lost the ability to grow up and be in good relationship with ourselves, with one another, and not fall into different variations of supremacy thinking. So for me, that's the root of the crisis.
I look at the environment and our crisis as we live in a terrarium. We cannot tackle these crises that are multiplying as we get closer to elections, and we cannot disconnect our health, the community's health, from the ecosystem.
Then I got COVID, and then I got COVID again, and my legs stopped working. I had suffered full body muscle atrophy, but I didn't have a GP. It fundamentally changed my perspective on things and the socio-psychological ramifications that are a direct result of what's happened in the past 4 years. Economically, culturally, politically, environmentally, they really need to be looked at. And frankly, it's a terrifying prospect to look at it in the face.
I do see it basically as a crisis of division and distraction of the masses and a real lack of accountability that's allowed, basically. Like, so humanity's gotten to this point through science and all of the technological innovations, and yet we're willing and able to just completely forget the fact that science is very clearly telling us now that CO2 in the atmosphere is at a tipping point. We are the last hope.
And so I believe that the crisis is deviation from the rule of law, and I believe that one of the main solutions is a return to the rule of law. And lately, there's been some real key players in the country that have just, thumbed their nose at administrative law. Daniel Smith's one of them.
The specifics on the relationship with the land related to, how it hits us in the face now with climate change. It's obvious now that we're facing this water shortage in southern Alberta that we have not listened. We've separated ourselves from nature.
When we walked up the creek bed, we found dead fish and beaver houses that were abandoned and beaver dams that were empty, and it really hit home to me that there's got to be something that we can do to make this better. And so, long story short, in the fall of 1999, we got together with a few of my neighbors that shared similar concern about the water, and we met in my folks' basement, and we just talked about memories and how we remembered it, and how the creek used to flow, and you could lie on your back in the water and pick Saskatoons off the overhanging bushes, and how there used to be mink and pheasants around, and those were all gone. And we ended up deciding that we needed to do something as a collaborative group, and things work better together than they do singly. And so we formed the Beaver Creek Watershed Group. And the biggest thing is the people that have these water courses running through their land, they're probably the most passionate people on the planet when it comes to taking care of what's in front of them. So whether it be animals, families, community, and ultimately water. Water is one thing that drives this world, both economically and if physically. We need water to survive. Water is life. As producers, we have to feed the continually growing 8 billion people population. The best way to get forward with it is to talk to the stakeholders that are out there, be it community groups, organizations, whatever they are. They're doing good work. The government of Canada has a hydrometric survey station on Beaver Creek right next to my place, actually, so it's easy for me to monitor. The provincial bodies don't have any flow data of their own that's been developed or looked at in the length of the creek. So we have one flow monitoring station that's monitored by the Canadian government that's in the last third of the length of the creek. It doesn't give a full scope of what's going on in the whole watershed. So I think the biggest process is to get these three governing bodies that revolve around water licensing to sit at the same table, and not necessarily just around licensing, but around water and creek health and all the things.